Eonia, Ijaje Wibita te Miakonda, Te Sindua Ubli, Ishtasunda Nia Shingoa Ubli, Wache Jaje Wibita te Marisa Cummings, Inoha Ijaje Wibita ke Catherine Cummings, Wachewa Uelinge, I Dadiha Ijaje Wibita ke Tenugunatid, Te Sindanu. Wache Jaje Wibita ke Mike Cummings Elinge. Wikon Ijaje Wibita ke Te Sinduau Eunice Walker Elinge. So hello everyone. I introduce myself in my language, which is Umaha. And the Umaha people were once part of the Great Lakes area and then moved south into what's now called Nebraska, Iowa, and even the South Dakota area as we traveled along the Missouri south to our current homelands, which are in Macy, Walt Hill, Pender, Nebraska. We ceded through treaty the land that created the state of Nebraska. So that's a little bit about my people. Umaha means the people who went upstream, and it refers to the separation of the Umaha from our sister tribes, the Osage or Wajaje, the Oto, or the Osage, Quapaw, Ponca, and Kaw, and who are now all in Oklahoma, along with the Oto, who are also very close relatives of us and the Iowa people. So that's a little bit about the people who move upstream, as I come from. I am also, my Umaha name is Miakonda. It refers to the grandmother moon, the grandmother spirit that resides in the moon. It translates to moon power in English. My English name is Marisa Cummings, and I was born in what is now Winnebago, Nebraska, at the Omaha-Winnebago IHS Service Unit. And in 1976, I'm 44 years old. I was raised in Sioux City, Iowa, which is a tri-state area of Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. I also belong to the Buffalo Tail clan, and we are Sky people in our clan circle, or what we call the Hulaga. And my mother's was a third-generation German descendant, or German settler. So her people came and settled in what's now Nebraska. And my father is Umaha, and his mother was like my mother. I was very, very close to her, and she has passed away. So all of my parents and my grandmother have passed away. So I just told you a little bit in my introduction about who I am and who I come from. I am the oldest of 8 children. So there is about an 18-year difference between me and my youngest siblings that are twin boys. There were 4 girls and 4 boys. One of my sisters passed away as a baby, so I was 2 years old when she was born. There are 7 living children in my family. I had my oldest daughter when I was 16 years old, and her name is Lauren, and she resides in Chicago now and has a job and works downtown. She went to college and graduate school, so she works for a big insurance company. When Lauren was about 1.5 years old, I took her with me to the University of Iowa, where I did my undergraduate work and my degree. And then I worked for the University of Iowa for about 9 years in an office that was a diversity office. It was called the Center for Diversity and Enrichment. So I worked specifically with Native students, but also all students coming from different backgrounds. And I really loved my job there. I really loved my experience there. After a while, though, in around 2012, I really was homesick and I wanted to go home. I lived in Iowa City for almost 18 years of my life, and I had met my ex-husband there, and we had 3 more children. So my daughter Lauren is 27 years old. My daughter Brianna is 21 years old. My son Darius is 20, and then my youngest daughter Nia is a senior in high school, and she's 17. So I took my children and moved back to Sioux City, where I worked for Little Priest Tribal College in Winnebago. And then my tribe recruited me to work there as the CEO, or what we call the CTO, the Chief Tribal Officer, that oversees all the tribal programs as well as the administration. And I did that for a while. And then after I left there, I decided to go back into higher education, because I really love working with Native students that are on this journey of higher education. So I worked at the University of South Dakota with a grant called, it was an Office of Violence Against Women grant to help end sexual assault on college campuses. And then I took the Director of Native Student Services position. So I worked directly with Native students at our cultural center. I was really engaged in just their lives, but also programming and support for them. And what I realized is we have a really amazing generation coming up that is so very fearless and so very strong. And I'm really excited to work with Native students in any capacity, even now. So about 3 months ago, my family and I uprooted and moved here to the Twin Cities. I took the position as the CEO of the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, or MIWRC. And so we're really enjoying just being here, and I love my job. I love working with Native women in all different capacities, but specifically in work of healing and traditional teachings. It's very beautiful work. So I am going to try and answer some of the questions that I was given. So that's a little bit about my story and how I got here. I had 3 of my kids when I was an undergrad at Iowa. I got my master's degree a little over a year ago, or not even a year ago. Just this past May, I got my master's in tribal administration and governance from the University of Minnesota Duluth, which is an awesome program, a very, very strong program. And so that was part of my journey as well. So I grew up in the city. I'm an urban Indian. I'm also, but I was raised Omaha, so I don't really know anything else. My grandmother was such a big part of my life, and such a big part of the unconditional love that I felt in her home. So my grandmother and I were very, very close. And my grandmother was a first generation or a first language speaker. So Umaha was her first language. My grandmother grew up on our reservation in really difficult times. She got tuberculosis in the 1950s and was sent to a sanitarium in Rapid City, where she had half of one of her lungs removed. So she's a survivor. Her father and mother were both sent to boarding schools, and my grandma also was sent to Haskell boarding school in Lawrence, Kansas, which many people know now as a Haskell Indian Nations University. But Haskell also has a very dark past of being a very brutal boarding school. So her father went to Carlisle, or was sent to Carlisle boarding school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and her mother went to Genoa. Both were very traditional people, though. Her mother carried the Mark of Honor in our tribe, which is a very high level honor. And her father was actually our first tribal chairman and held that position for over 25 years and lived in really abject poverty to be able to serve the people. He was also a singer. So He's the one who named my father. My father's name is Stampeding Buffalo. And my father was a first generation in our family to go on to college. He went to Iowa State, Morningside University, or Morningside College in Sioux City, and then on to Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, and where he got his master's degree. And he did corporate public relations for quite some time. And then he came back and helped work for our people. He was the general manager of our casino and got our casino started in the 1990s. And so he did a lot of economic development work with our tribe in the 90s, and also historic revitalization of our culture and our language. So I guess for myself, you know, it was, I was sent to predominantly white, high achieving schools. And so it was difficult for me, because people would always kind of call me out as being an Indian, and it was a really negative thing to be an Indian. But I also went home and saw my dad, who was Umaha, and he was so skilled in so many ways. And then, you know, I had my Umaha family, that my grandmother and her brothers and sisters, my other grandmas and grandpas, and so I still received those teachings and an understanding of who I was. And so it was difficult, but it was still really good. So as far as who influenced my life as a young Native person, definitely my father. My father was so into educating me about our people and where we came from, and strength. And he was very adamant to raise me as a female leader. And he would say that the women are the ones who are going to carry things forward into the future. And so our women need to be strong. And instead of telling me like I was pretty or I was cute, he would always tell me how intelligent I was and how strong I was. And so those are two characteristics that always meant a lot to me, is intelligence and strength. Because it allows us to think strategically. And some of this even comes from clan teachings of strategic thinking, forward thinking, carrying life forward for our people. You know, our people were really amazing strategists. And we forget that now. You know, there's these stereotypes that we were just out naked, running around, hunting buffalo, when in reality, our people had systems, food systems that were unheard of anywhere else in the world. We were agriculturalists, we were astronomers, we were all of these things, doctors. We didn't have a need for jails because our people, you know, had ways of dealing with things. And it's not to say we were perfect or we had a perfect life, because I don't think that was the case. But we did have a way of doing things that worked for us. And we need to be proud of how intelligent and resilient our people are. So how has culture played a role in my journey? Well, as a young person, I wasn't really, I was always interested in the history of my people and in the culture in some capacity, but I wasn't really interested in living a cultural way of life as a young person. I wanted elements of it. But as I got older, I committed to dedicating my life to living as an Umaha Wa'u, an Omaha woman, and what that meant for me and what that meant for my family. Because many of us receive different, you know, there's different teachings based on people's family, their clan, the way that their family did it. So understanding my family and those teachings, and that brought me to the Three Fires Medewan Lodge, and I am a first degree Medewan. And I hold that way of life very, very close to my heart. And it's a beautiful life. And so knowing and learning always with our connection to creation itself and our connection to carrying life forward is just a big part of what I do every day, all day. What has inspired me in my life? My children are my biggest inspiration. My oldest daughter, having had her so young, and she went through college with me when, you know, we had really hard times. And so I knew that I was willing to do anything for her to give her a better life. And so that was part of why I worked so hard in college. And then my other children are just, being a mother to me was the most beautiful and important thing that I could ever do is be a mother to my children. And so I did my best to be the best mother that I could. And we're not perfect, so we make mistakes. And in retrospect, I think back if I would have done things different. But everything happens for a reason. And I'm really just honored that my kids all chose me as their mother. So did I always see myself where I am today? Absolutely not. The way that my family raised me was to kind of be a big time lawyer. And I was supposed to be a lawyer and be in DC and doing work for Native people, but maybe not really living the life of a Indigenous woman. Maybe living in mainstream society, but working behind the scenes to help Native people. And we all know that there's a spectrum of Native identity. And so that's how I saw myself. I didn't think I'd ever sow. I didn't think I'd ever plant and harvest crops. I didn't think I would ever be a teacher. But that's what's come naturally to me in my life. So I definitely didn't think that I would be who I am today. And what challenges did I have to overcome? I had to overcome a lot of challenges. Racism as a young woman, as a child. I had to overcome, issues in my own family with whether it be abuse or different things like that we all have to go through, or some of us have to go through at different points of our life. So I had to overcome a lot of different obstacles, being a single parent, being a young mother. And those were all things that I was really happy, I guess, to learn from. So what does being Native mean to me? Well, we know there's these terms like Native or American Indian or Indigenous, and they're all pretty much interchangeable for the original people of this land, which is now they call North America, right? So the original people of this land. And then we all have our different groups that we come from, and some of us come from multiple tribal groups, right? So for me, I look at that question as being Umaha. What does being Umaha mean to me? And being Umaha is central to who I am. Being Umaha is very much what leads me in my life, what leads my direction, what leads me to make the choices that I make, even in terms of where I work and the work that I do, both work that would be like professional and also work that is more spiritual or personal. So helping our people enjoy who they are and teach about who we are is really important work. What advice would I give to Native youth today? For the younger ones, the elementary kids, I would encourage you to ask questions. Ask lots of questions about who you are and where you come from, because no one else in the world is made up just like you. You're original, you're unique, you're beautiful. You come from strong, resilient, amazing people. So ask questions about who you are. And to the older ones, the high school kids, I would encourage you to always also ask those questions about who you are, but don't deter too far from the path that you were designed to do while you're in this world, right? So don't stray too far away with all of these things that this life can distract us from our family, from those we love, from the work that we're meant to do. And so there's technology can be a beautiful thing. We're using technology right now to talk to you, but technology can also be distracting. It can be used to harm people. It can be used to bully people, So I would encourage you to always think good about others, to think positively about others, and think positively about yourself and what you want to contribute to this world that's changing right now in so many really beautiful ways. So I guess that's really my big story for you. I'm going to pause it right here, and I may come back in a little bit. It's always easier for me to speak when I get questions, because then I can speak to the topics that really interest you and that you really want to know about. So it's a little more difficult when I'm just kind of talking to myself here on the video. So I just wanted to talk briefly about what my experience was like in grade school, middle school, high school, and then college. And the reason I wanted to share that with you is so that you would know and hopefully feel like you're not alone, and that you're supported, and that there's others out there that are praying for you and care for you as this next generation that's coming up. So when I was in grade school, I remember some of the things that I remember most are, of course, recess, right? I remember playing dodgeball, or kickball was really big back then. I also remember teachers and having to go through Thanksgiving and Halloween, and the way that our people were portrayed when I was at majority non-native schools, and how that was so difficult for me in my identity formation, because people would go around class going, whoa, 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 you know, and the teachers wouldn't say anything. Or people would say, like, Marisa's an Indian, you know, she's an Indian. And I remember one day we were checking, I was probably in third or fourth grade, and I was checking, we had to check a box, and it had the race category on there. And I checked that I was white. And the teacher came by, and in front of the whole class was like, Marisa, you're not white, you're Indian. And she said, and don't you forget that. And she said, you need to check the box that says that you're Indian. And I remember, like, the whole class started laughing and like war whooping. And I remember that as being such a hard time. So I'm kind of an introvert and a nerd. I like to read books a lot. And so I spent most of my my time, you know, reading books at recess, or just being kind of by myself. Because that's the type of school that I went to. It was actually a Catholic school in Sioux City. And then I went to a public middle school. So I was around more diversity there, which really helped me in my identity formation, see people that look like me, and know that I wasn't so different than everyone. But it still was, you know, a lot of the history and government classes that you take that glaze over the history of our ancestors and the impact that our ancestors had in this country, in the formation of this country, and even the sustaining the settlers when they first got here, the colonists, right? So that was my experience, you know, in middle school. And people had begun to be more, I guess, more friendly. And then in high school, I remember specifically my government and my history classes, and I got to be a lot more outspoken. I started going to my first protests. My first experience with social justice movements was in high school, when we were organizing, or I wasn't organizing, but participating in different marches for the Indian Child Welfare Act. My dad's brother and sister were adopted out to white families, and so our family knew very much about how that impacts Native people, Native babies that are adopted out. It impacts the whole family, because my grandma kept my dad, and he always knew he had a brother and sister out there until he found them. So so I started doing marches for that, and reading a lot of books about social justice movements. And that was really where my passion and where my heart was at. When I got to college, I majored in American Studies. That my focus was on American Indian Native Studies, and my minor was in African American World Studies. And I wanted to understand more about how these social justice movements worked and how we could make this world a better place. That's really what I wanted to know. What do we need to do to make this world a better place? And part of that was I had an instructor who was an African-American woman, and she broke down racism and colonialism and oppression and defined all of these things that I knew about, but I wasn't able to articulate and put voice to. And she taught me how to do that in her class. And then that has, played a pivotal role in the work that I've done throughout my life, in trying to make the lives of our people and all people better, more equal, and just so that we can live our best lives as human beings, right? So in college, I really enjoyed my American Indian Native Studies classes, and specifically federal Indian law and policy classes, because I started to understand in my family line where unhealthy or dysfunctional things started to happen in my family, and how those aligned with federal policies and laws that Congress created, these laws that, such as the Dawes Act or the Relocation Act, where so many of our ancestors came to the cities. It's important for us to know what those are and how those operate, so that we can know the good and also the challenging times that our family and our ancestors have gone through. So that became a huge part of my life. I actually now do presentations where I show pictures of my family, starting all the way back with my great-great-great-grandfather, who was one of our tribal leaders. And I go through each generation and talk about those federal Indian policies and how they impacted my family in real living ways, right? Some of the things to think about is that I was 2 years old when it became legal for us to practice our ceremonies. So there were generations of our people that had to go into hiding to pray. And it's interesting that a country that was founded on the freedom of religion actually oppressed and punished us for practicing our way of life, right? And our way of praying and connecting to creation. And so I think that's a really important thing to think about is, my dad and my grandmother didn't have access to the same ceremony. Well, my grandmother did. She witnessed them as a girl. But throughout her lifetime, those ceremonies in the 1950s were put away. And so our bundles were put away. And part of my journey was repatriating my family bundle from the museum. And a lot of people in my community were upset or scared because they were Christian, and they no longer remembered. They no longer remembered the teachings and the ways that came along with those bundles. So I had to seek that out. And so it's just something that along my life, it was really instrumental. My family also was very supportive and encouraging me of doing that. Since I was a young girl, I asked so many questions that they would always say, Marisa, you need to go find this, or Marisa, you need to go do this when you get older. And so a lot of who I am is the result of those relatives and ancestors that I have, and their wishes, and also their prayers for me. And I think of my future generations and the thoughts, the prayers, and the wishes that I have for them, and how that is so important that we make those prayers and offerings for life being carried forward into the future. So my college experience had a lot to do with and my research that I learned how to research. That played a lot into just what I do. So I do a lot of historical research on my tribe, specifically how federal policy has impacted my tribe and impacted the role of women within my tribe. So specifically how patriarchy was used as a way to dominate Umaha women who had a lot of agency or freedom. We were the ones who were the seed keepers. We were the ones who planted food, harvested the food, and food was our trade item back then. So we had other trade items too, like buffalo hides, and even the buffalo hides, women were the ones who processed those hides. So women played a critical role in our trading, a critical role in our economies, pre-contact. And so a lot of my research and my studies surround that, so that information could be passed on to others into the future. Of course, this all kind of is my story and how it evolved. But after I did the master's program in tribal administration and governance, a lot of it sounds very business-like, but in reality, we were talking a lot about what does it look like to go through constitutional reform in our communities, our tribal communities? What does it look like for our tribes to empower themselves in the sense of who our communities are? They call that like basically nation building, right? So how do we rebuild our nations into these powerhouses that we once were? But also what are nations made up of? They're made up of human beings, right? So many of you probably belong or are connected to your community. Maybe you go home there, go back to your community in the summertime or around powwow season. So maintaining that connection to our communities is very, very important because we don't exist alone, independent. We exist within a larger tribal circle, especially for those who come from people who had clans. Our clans are like a mini nation within a bigger nation. So among the Omaha people, we have 10 clans, and I belong to one of those clans. It's called Buffalo Tail Clan. And the Buffalo Tail Clan is, like I said, of the Sky people. And the Sky people's like a little bigger group, right? So we have this kinship system, which is our clan, and then a little bigger kinship system, which is the Sky people, and then a bigger kinship system, which is the whole Omaha people, and then a bigger kinship system, which is the Degiha, or all those 5 tribes that were once related and still are related, but were once more connected. So and then we have, groups or tribes that we had, I guess you would call them like we had a relationship with, like we had a confederacy, right? And then there was tribes that we had alliances with. And so how did we interact with those larger tribes too? So a lot of that is the study that I do along with, my sisters. I have, I told you I had 2 sisters, and I have 4 brothers, and I've delivered all of my sisters' children. So one sister has 7 and the other sister has 4. And what that looks like to bring our babies into the world, hearing the language, and our babies knowing who they are from the moment they enter this world, right? So a lot of the work I do is also around just traditional teachings around that, and learning what those are. So by work doesn't always mean we're teaching. It also means we're learning, and we're always learning. And so I am very thankful to the teachers that I do have and who have stepped forward in my life to help guide me. So that's a little bit about myself. I hope that my educational journey and who I am helps you in some way. And I encourage you to stay with it right now. I know it's hard with COVID, and I have a senior in high school too. She goes to Champlin, and so I know that it's a hard time for you guys, and you're in a time that is hasn't been experienced in a long time with a pandemic. And so I encourage you to be safe, to take care of yourselves, and mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And I can't wait to see what amazing leaders you become someday. So that's all I have to say. Shayna Agape, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you later.